The story of a lonely bastard. The world, Russell had learned, was a vast, echoing chamber, and he was often its only inhabitant. At 12 years old, his memory of his parents was a whisper, a faded photograph in the orphanage's worn album. 2 smiling faces, gone too soon, snatched by an illness when he was just 2. He lived at the St. Jude's Orphanage, a sturdy brick building that, despite its well-meaning matron and warm meals, often felt less like a home and more like a permanent waiting room. Life inside the orphanage was predictable, safe in its own way. But the moment Russell stepped outside, the world shifted. The street he lived on, a bustling artery of life, held a peculiar venom for him. It wasn't the traffic or the stray dogs. It was the people. They'd look at him, a skinny boy with wide, sorrowful eyes, and the whispers would begin. There goes the bastard. No mum, no dad, just a burden. The words, hurled like invisible stones, chipped away at his tender spirit. He was a bright boy, keen on stories and the mysteries of the stars, but these words, sharp and cruel, had the power to reduce him to a quivering mess. He'd often retreat to a hidden corner of the orphanage yard, burying his face in his knees, hot tears tracing paths down his cheeks, a silent plea escaping his lips for parents he couldn't remember, for a love he'd never known. His torment wasn't limited to the adults' glares and whispers. A pack of older boys, 14 or 15, led by a lanky, sneering kid named Victor, had made Russell their pet project. They'd wait for him after school, or when he ran errands for Matron Mary. "Hey, orphan," they'd jeer, their voices grating. "Where's your mummy, bastard?" They'd throw anything they could find, pebbles, rotten fruit, even clods of dirt, at his back as he hurried away, head bowed. Russell would clench his fists, wishing for an invisible shield, for the ground to swallow him whole. Their taunts echoed in the air, a public declaration of his loneliness, amplifying his sense of utter insignificance. One gray afternoon, the bullying escalated into something Russell never thought possible. He was walking home from the market, clutching a loaf of bread and a bag of apples for the orphanage kitchen. A public bus rumbled alongside him, slowing for a turn. Suddenly, Victor and his gang materialized from behind a parked car, surrounding him. Fear clenched Russell's throat. Before he could react, strong hands grabbed him, hoisting him up. "Look at the little orphan," Victor sneered, his face close to Russell's, reeking of stale cigarettes. "No one cares about you." Russell struggled, the bread and apples scattering on the asphalt. The bus, now barely crawling, was right beside them. With a shocking burst of synchronized effort, they shoved him, not into the bus, but out. His feet tangled, and he tumbled onto the pavement, grazing his knees and elbows. As he lay there, stunned and shaken, the boys doubled over with laughter. "Bastard, go cry to your dead parents," Victor howled, his voice carrying far too clearly down the street, before they melted back into the shadows. Humiliation burned hotter than the scrapes on his skin. Russell slowly pushed himself up, retrieving his scattered groceries. The bus driver, having seen the commotion, pulled over and looked at him with a pitying gaze, but Russell just shook his head and hurried away, the words, "bastard," ringing in his ears like a death knell. He stumbled back to the orphanage, his vision blurred by unshed tears. He was not badly hurt, not physically. But inside, something fractured. He felt an emptiness so profound it threatened to swallow him whole. He barely registered Matron Mary's worried questions as he slipped away, up the creaking stairs, and into the small, sparsely furnished room he shared with 2 other boys who were currently out playing. The room was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the burning chaos within him. He sank onto his narrow bed, the weight of years of insults, of constant loneliness, pressing down. "Bastard, no one cares. No mum, no dad." The words looped in his mind, a relentless, suffocating chant. He couldn't go on like this. He couldn't. His gaze fell upon his bedsheets, neatly folded at the foot of his bed. An idea, dark and chilling, took root. With trembling hands, he untied the knot Matron Mary had made. He pulled the sheet free, a long, sturdy strip of cotton. He fashioned a rough knot, his fingers fumbling, then moved towards the window, where a sturdy beam jutted out from the wall. He stood on his small wooden chair, looped the sheet over the beam, and tightened it. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He looked down at the street below, a final, desperate thought of the world he was about to leave. Just as he was about to step off the chair, a voice, sharp and urgent, pierced the silence of his despair. "Stop, don't do it." The shout came from the window next door. Russell froze, his eyes wide. Through the twilight gloom, he saw her, a girl with dark, worried eyes and a cascade of brown hair. It was Maria, 14 years old, who lived in the house right beside the orphanage, a girl he'd occasionally seen playing in her yard, but never spoken to. "Please," Maria cried again, her voice strained. "Don't, just, don't." Her voice, so full of genuine pleading, cut through Russell's fog of despair. He looked at her, truly looked, and something shifted. He was seen. Someone was looking. Someone cared enough to shout. Slowly, his hands shaking, he loosened the sheet, untying the knot. He stepped off the chair, his legs wobbly, and the sheet fell limp to the floor. The next morning, Russell felt a strange mix of shame and a faint, unfamiliar flicker of hope. He expected to face questions from Matron Mary, but Maria had kept his secret. Instead, there was a knock on the orphanage door, and Matron Mary called his name. Maria was there, standing awkwardly, a small, determined figure. "Can I talk to Russell?" she asked Matron Mary, who, after a moment of consideration, nodded. They went to the small, quiet parlor room. Maria sat opposite him, her gaze soft, understanding. "Russell," she began, her voice gentle, I saw what you tried to do yesterday. Are you okay?" Russell looked down at his hands, twisting them together. The words tumbled out, a dam breaking. He told her everything. The constant insults, the feeling of being an outcast, the death of his parents, the deep, gnawing loneliness, the lack of friends, the way his heart ached for a family he couldn't remember. He poured out the years of pain, the humiliation of the bus incident, the despair that had driven him to the edge. Maria listened, her expression never wavering. When he finished, she reached out, a tentative touch on his arm. "Russell," she said softly, "I can't imagine how hard that must be. No one should have to go through that alone." She looked at his arm, then his leg, noticing the fresh scrapes and darkening bruises from the bus incident. "What happened here?" she asked, her voice hardening slightly. Russell explained about Victor and his gang, how they'd thrown him out of the slow-moving bus, shouting their cruel epithets. A spark ignited in Maria's eyes. "They did what?" Her voice was low, laced with an anger that surprised Russell. "It's okay," Russell mumbled, already used to the injustice. "No, it's not okay." Maria stood up, her brow furrowed. "That's not just bullying, Russell. That's assault." Later that day, Maria went home, her mind buzzing. She knew she couldn't fight Victor and his gang herself, but she knew someone who could. Her older brother, Roland, was 20, tall and broad-shouldered, with a quiet strength that belied his protective nature. Maria found him in the garage, tinkering with his motorbike. She explained everything, her voice tied with indignation. Russell's pain, the bus incident, the attempted suicide, the relentless verbal abuse. Roland listened, his expression growing darker with each word. He knew Russell from seeing him around the neighborhood as a quiet, almost invisible boy. Hearing the extent of his suffering ignited a fierce protective instinct. The next day, Roland happened to be walking down the street when Victor and his gang were once again loitering. Roland approached them, his presence commanding. He didn't shout. He spoke in a low, dangerous voice, recounting what they had done to Russell, detailing the bus incident, the bullying, the names. He made it clear, without laying a single hand on them, that if they ever so much as looked at Russell the wrong way again, there would be severe consequences. His reputation, combined with the sheer intensity of his quiet fury, was enough. The older boys, for all their bravado, were nothing more than cowardly bullies. They scattered, their smug grins replaced by pale fear. From that day forward, something shifted in Russell's world. The whispers on the street faded. Victor and his gang, surprisingly, left him alone. They'd cross the street to avoid him, their earlier bravado replaced by a palpable fear of Roland. Russell could walk anywhere, go anywhere, without the dread of being called a bastard, or having stones thrown at him. It was a liberation he hadn't dared to dream of. But more than the absence of cruelty, Russell gained something infinitely more valuable, a friend. Maria came to visit him regularly at the orphanage. They'd talk for hours, sharing stories, dreams, and fears. She taught him to laugh freely, to believe in his own worth. She was the anchor he never knew he needed, a bright star in his once lonely galaxy. Russell, the boy who had once believed himself to be nothing more than a lonely bastard, finally understood that he was loved, he was valued, and he had a friend. Maria and Russell, through shared pain and unwavering support, truly became the best of friends, forever. The end. Story by Kayode Eke. Editor by Tulbaz.